All right, so let's take a look at these service providers. So we'll create one over here at the very top. We do need to specify that this is going to be an injectable type to be a service provider. So we will use that same decorator as we used with component, but here injectable and parentheses, and then right afterwards, let's put on there the export class. The service name here, since we're dealing with tasks, let's just call it task service. And injectable is something we also have to import from the Angular library, just like we have imported here component on init. We're going to import also injectable. And since I know that's inside of this library, we can just call its name, right? So awesome. So let's create here the variable tasks. Let's set that to an array of first task, second task, second task.
Very creative naming.
Right.
I always do that.
Third task. Otherwise, it'd be wake up, code, go to sleep. Right? Cool. So we have the tasks on there. And so let's see. So we can leave it as is for just a moment and look at this service provider. And all it's doing for us right now is just holding data, right? If we want these tasks to show up in one of our components, such as perhaps this tasks component right over here, we have to make sure that this component knows that he expects one of these providers to be included. So let's do that. Let's give this component the expectation of a provider. So we'll here put providers, just like we did before with directives. This is a provider. And let's add the class name into the providers array here. And we will use what we talked about earlier with dependency injection here in the parameter of the constructor. So kind of bear with me for a second. The idea here is just saying that, again, just like Christopher said, we'll expect this task service to be available for us in this component. We want to use the task service with some kind of name. So here we'll say this is going to be a public. I'm going to use the lowercase task service, which is just something I'm making up. And I'm going to say it's the type of the task service class that we created way up here. So this entire service provider has now been injected into this component. First off, by letting it know that we have the provider included. And secondly, by injecting it through the constructor. So as soon as this loads, we will have a task service variable available to us, which represents this object here. So for us to see that, I'm going to go here and just use interpolation and print the task service dot tasks. So let's see what that comes up with. And since this is an array of data, let's give it a pipe here and say JSON to see the data. I want to show this here real quick. So here it is. So what we end up doing here, I'm going to go back for a moment. We'll swing right back to the page for a moment to see this, is we expected the task service provider here. Now we have a variable called task service. So either I use that task service variable here, or I directly call on the task service key of tasks in my template. I'm simply just calling on this set of data right here. It's nice, it's very convenient. And we can go a little further here and even show what it would look like if we wanted to print all of them. If you all remember, before we did the ng4, we'll do the same thing here real quick. Oops. Unordered list. Unordered list. Let's put in the middle here a list item or a loose item. List item.
Loose item.
Let's see, ng4. And last time I put 4, it's of, right? So let task of tasks. Now, it's not just tasks, it's actually task service dot tasks, right? Because this is giving us access to this service. So I'm just calling on the key of tasks to access those. Save this, swing over, we'll see, whoops. Let's see what I did here. Oh, we didn't even print anything in the middle of these list items, and that's why nothing's coming up. So let's go here in the middle of them. Let's use interpolation to print that task variable that gets created in each one of those loops. Let's save this, right? So we needed this here between the list items, or the list item there, and there it is. We added the, now we have a list in our component that is calling directly on the task service, so all this data can be now in the task service. Now, to go a little further about the task service, we can give the task service other functions like update, perhaps. That can be a function we can give it, all sorts of things, so that perhaps in our logic here in the component, we can have an event that if a task is clicked on, we can trigger an update function in our task service that may be perhaps calling to the server, or doing an API call and updating that piece of data, or maybe even just retrieving data, right? Changing data, whatever the case may be. So this is kind of like the gateway for us to be able to call on different APIs or manipulate data. And a task service specifically is, or a service provider specifically, is built so that we can use the same service provider here on multiple components. So if we had two of these components and we wanted both components to point at the task service tasks, we can inject both of the components, the task service, through dependency injection, and we can have them both showing the tasks. And if one updates, it updates our task service, so both will show the difference, the change in the tasks. Awesome.